March 7th, 2018, and we will be starting at 6:02. I'm asking everyone to stand at this time for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Secretary, if you would call the roll, please.
Mr. Mitchell?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Present.
Ms. Gass? Ms. McGowan? Here. Mrs. Momini? Present. Ms. Gully? And Ms. Seats?
Present. Thank you. We do have a quorum. On item C on your agenda, we'd like to entertain a motion for approval.
Move to approve the agenda as written.
We have a motion. I need a support.
Support.
And a motion and a support. Madam Secretary, if you would call the roll, please.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Ms. McGowan?
Yes.
Mrs. Momini, yes. Ms. Seats?
Yes.
And Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Motion carries. Item D on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone in the public at this time which is to address this board? Please give us your name and your address.
Marvin Coleman Haywood, 270 East May Street, Benton Harbor, Michigan. I'm here on behalf of the children here in the city of Benton Harbor, as well as my kids that have attended and went on out to Benton Harbor area schools. And as I speak today, I speak because I have been following this situation from the beginning. And as I had told the superintendent prior to her coming, we're going to be keeping a very watchful eye on you. And since her inception, they have basically got rid of all the teachers that had the best interests of the students at hand and hired top heavy. I think that most of the direction was being taken from Miss Julia Earl, who was the head of 21st Century. We have continued to complain about the children having homework. Most of the children have been denied the proper education that is needed for them to be in compliance with the partnership agreement, okay? Truly, there has been many forces that have been working against the school. And truly, in order to understand these students, you must have an understanding of the culture here in the city of Benton Harbor. So whenever you bring in someone from an outside entity into the city of Benton Harbor, if they don't know the culture, then they'll begin to comply with whatever is best or in their best interest. I have watched this process for quite a while. These children truly deserve better. And if they're given the right tools and the right resources, they will achieve on whatever level, and they will obtain the highest on any field of study. I mean, it's just been proven fact. Benton Harbor High School has a very rich history, and these children, as I say, they deserve better. Truly, it's been circumstances that they may bring from home, but if you have the right teachers in place that understand the culture, they will know how to deal with the kids. Sometimes it's not about books, it's about teaching them how to learn from a different perspective. And this is what has been missing. And when you bring in individuals that don't know the students, don't have an understanding of the culture of this city, they can't possibly have the children fall in line. We have a lot of teachers at the high school, Ms. Rosenberg and various other teachers, that they comply with her. They'll go in her classroom and they do well because she knows the students. And when you bring in, like, it's been a lot of teachers that's been brought in that don't have a clue as to the children, they don't have a clue as to the culture. And sometimes you have to go outside and get a understanding with the parents when you're teaching the children. I have, as always, I have stood for transparency because transparency has been the first order of the day. And like I say, the 21st Century program, they have instituted various things that I'm in agreement with and some things I'm not in agreement with. But when it comes to the superintendent, I don't see from the things that have been done, the children being ready for the 3-year plan. It's just not, I don't see it happening because we have lost more individuals because they complaining about the conditions that's been going on within the high school. And if you got the proper staff and the proper people taking the lead, you can't hire top heavy and expect the people at the bottom to take heed to what's going on. And that's what's been going on. They've been just hiring top heavy. If you look at all the people that's been fired, that has been qualified teachers, I can speak on Ms. Cone, who was taken out of cosmetology class, and another lady put there that wasn't even certified to teach cosmetology. And this has been going on throughout her tenure. And so we have to really get a grip on this so that as we move forward, we can have these children being trained. And I would recommend that the third floor at the high school be opened up. You take this administration building, put all of them on the first floor, and have that second and third floor utilized. We can put $1 million into a third floor that's not even being utilized. So that's just my thoughts. And I would like that the board and people from Lansing, wherever you may be from, as well as the lawyer, that they would take this back to the state. Also, if we can, we should erase the debt and allow them to start as the Benton Harbor Community School District instead of the Benton Harbor Area School District, as they did in Detroit, where we can erase the debt, start fresh, and move forward with the new agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public at this time which would like to address the board? If not, next item on the agenda is the MASB Superintendent Evaluation Facilitator, Donna Olser, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Let me just, excuse, I did catch the, cold that's going around, so I might be a little froggy for you tonight. I'll do my best though. So I just want to take a second, kind of walk through what our process is tonight so everybody knows what to expect. So our first kind of plan for the evening is that Dr. Walker will spend 30 minutes kind of reviewing the information that she provided to the board regarding her self-evaluation. And if, as time allows, you could certainly ask questions related to that. After that 30 minutes, then we will walk through the evaluation instrument itself. I know that you've had time to interact with it, are familiar with it, and have had the opportunity to make notes so that you'd be prepared for this. Just as we did last year, we'll start at the beginning with performance indicator A1 in governance and board relations. I'll poll the board, each board member, to see where you are from a scoring perspective. As a reminder, while it's a 4-point scale, you can score to the half point. So in other words, you could score a 2.5 versus a 2 or a 3. Just as a reminder of that, based on what I hear, a consensus score, and then make sure that the board is supportive of that consensus score before we move on to the next performance indicator. So just as a reminder, when we think about consensus, right, sometimes that means that we have to give up something. We don't all get 100% of what we want, but I definitely want to come up with a score in each of the performance indicators that you can all live with. If there's a disparity or some additional clarification needed, then we'll certainly handle that item by item, just as we did last time. As a reminder, and also because there's people in the audience who may not be familiar with this process, I'm simply a facilitator. It's not my role to have any opinion on the evidence presented, or it really is up to the Board of Education to evaluate the superintendent and no one else. That said, we will go ahead and start with the superintendent self-evaluation. Before I turn over, I will just simply point out that as we walk through the information when we begin the process, when there are significant disparities in our perceptions on the scoring, we'll simply walk through making sure we all have the same understanding of the language, what is the evidence that we're using to make that scoring decision, refer to the superintendent self-evaluation, check in, make sure we're all on the same page, ascertain the score, and then move on. Okay? All right. Dr. Walker, the floor is yours.
So good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
Okay. I'm actually going to start at the end. I think the important place is to start around the student growth model. So it's on page 15. And share with the board, there's a document in your handout that evidences how the staff growth was determined in their evaluation. So I'm in section G.
Section 2, should say section 2.
And in that section, At the top, I hand wrote the word student growth. There is a document here that shows how the staff student growth measures were used in their evaluation, and the MASB tool speaks to that consistency, that in whatever formula is determined for staff should be used by the district. So using this same formula, I applied it to myself. The staff, in their evaluations, it was based on the NWEA results, so I used those same results. So if you turn to the next page, and again at the top, the document that I shared, it says student growth, and you have a copy of the fall 2016, the fall 2017 NWEA student results. And if you look in the column with the first arrow, in that section, it says students with fall to fall scores, and it shows grades 2 through 11. And so taking the score in the fall of 2017-18, which measures the percentage of students who exhibited growth, which is the way the MASB tool is designed to measure growth only. And I basically added up those scores and took an average. And then I went back to the sheet that the district used with the staff, where it talks about percent of students meeting expected growth. And that is where the effective score that I provided came, because for reading, the average was, I think it was 47%, and in math, it was 44%. And so both of those fall within the effective range, therefore the 3. Any questions? Okay. So then I'd like to speak to the next section, the progress toward district-wide goals. And using the partnership agreement goals, the board had adopted those goals for me as well. So I used the data from the December 18th partnership agreement meeting. So if you turn the page in the document that I provided, across the top, it says progress toward district-wide goals, and it shows all the results of the data from the assessment of the partnership agreement that we looked at back in December. I eliminated all of the goals for the partnership agreement that said data not available. And then I just counted of those that are available, how many of them were at least halfway to the benchmark, because the benchmark is 18 months and this data is a 9-month look. And or any ones that had met the benchmark already, and I counted up those totals. And then I divided that out of the total possible. And so again, the MASB tool says 75 to 89% of the progress on those goals being met is effective. And my average percentage was 78% of the 41. So therefore, that is where that score for effective came as well. Any questions? I'd like to go next then to the instructional leadership packet, which is E. And go through those, for those areas. The performance evaluation, I gave a 3. And the document and data that I tried to share, I'm having, again, limited access to information and limited time to acquire and pull records. There's lots of data though to support that we are absolutely utilizing the performance evaluation tool as it's intended. All staff in this past school year were evaluated, which was a huge feat. Not all of the staff were evaluated on time, which we were after. I think it was 88% of those staff, but that's still a huge celebration. Hence, I gave myself a 3.
Dr. Walker, I apologize.
Yes, sure.
We left
E.
section G, section E.
And I went to E, instructional leadership.
Take this, Joe. Okay, on the bottom. On the bottom, yeah, it might be where it's clipped.
I have a question while Mr. Taylor is looking for that. Who maintains the evaluations? And what was the period of time the evaluations were taken?
So the
What tool?
So the evaluations are maintained in the system. It's not,
What
it's,
system?
I'm gonna tell you in a minute because I'm drawing blank because you asked me. I know, it'll come back to me. And that system, all the staff are registered into it. And what we do is we go in and we enter, for example, as a building principal, you would enter all the goals for the teachers, and that is one of the artifacts that's been here I shared, where one of the administrators had, communicated out to his staff on page 5 in that packet to go into stages, and that's the name of the system, and complete their self-assessment and their growth plan and their goals. And so as an example, so that was an expectation that all the administrators have been informed, there was a time period of which they were given to ensure the staff went in and did their self-evaluations and their self-assessments, et cetera. And so Stages is the tool that houses the actual data on the evaluation tool. Now, HR, that office is responsible for any time staff are hired, or if anyone is assigned a different supervisor, then HR will go in and they're responsible for making sure the right supervisors have the right staff assigned to them in Stages so that that person can engage, that supervisor can engage with their staff member through the process. The process begins at the beginning of the school year, and again, there are benchmarks that are to be completed. Again, starting with the self-assessment, the growth point of the goals, followed by the principal doing an observation before December, an observation the second semester, and having conversations with the teacher around that, and ultimately getting the observations completed before the end of the school year.
So, do you know approximately how many staff were evaluated?
Yes, the Stages last year's data said 88% of the staff were evaluated by the deadline that we had set, and I don't remember the deadline, and I'm sorry, but that's available if we need to get it. 88% of the teaching staff had their evaluations completed. Ultimately, I do believe we got closer to the 100% mark, but again, I don't have that exact data with me at this time because I just didn't have everything that I would like to have shared with you. But I do know that when we looked at our Q4 scorecard, which would have been June or July, 88% of the evaluations have been complete, which is a huge. Our teachers had not been evaluated, nor was there a tool. And so to have it done by the end of the 16th school year, we had to by law, by state law, and then to actually truly execute it in this past school year was a huge accomplishment that we were proud of. Other questions? Staff development as well. There's a tremendous amount of staff development. Again, the documents that I've included for you will evidence. There's a professional development calendar that we started and built in the spring of last school year for this school year that we have followed. We did have space in that professional development calendar for the second semester as needs would have arose. But we did do the professional development that was aligned to the goals in the district improvement plan, the partnership agreement plan, et cetera, which really do center around culture and climate, improving curriculum and instructional needs, building leadership capacity, et cetera. So what was done in particular this summer that had not occurred before is the staff were given what we call a boot camp for the principals and for the teaching staff. And what happened during that boot camp is it was differentiated, meaning the staff had options on what they could attend for, and some of it was required. That allowed the staff to select what professional development best suited where their needs were. And so again, that's a very specific differentiated program, and our PD has continued to align to the data as we've assessed ourselves through the scorecards. So the documents that you will find following the stages information, when you get to page 13, you have copies of the professional development calendars and the topics and how they align to the district improvement plan, how they align to the evaluation tools that we utilize with the teachers called Thoughtful Classroom and the administrators. And so this evidences who, where it's going to be held, et cetera. And then if you continue through the documents, you actually have in the weekly memo, I included those to share that we also continue to develop the staff and the weekly correspondence that I provide to the staff, giving them updates or reminders or protocol and things that they need to do. And if you continue going, you'll get to page 20. You actually can see the boot camp for the teachers, where you can see it says choice sessions and it identifies those sessions and et cetera and the date. So again, very purposeful attention has been given to the professional development of the teaching staff.
Superintendent, what measurement tool do you use for success of programs or that you have offered to the teacher? How do you determine the effectiveness of the boot camps? Just a little more specific.
The staff are given surveys, and again, I do not have access to the whole documentation following the professional development.
I'm more talking about the practice. I understand that they did the boot camp, but how do you measure how successful the boot camp was, not from the teacher, but from the actual application and appropriation, which you see on a day-to-day basis of the teachers?
One of the biggest tools, which is also in a different one of your packets that we use, Mrs. Seats, to look at how the teachers perform is through the walkthroughs that we do. That's just one example. And so the data that's collected in the walkthrough process gives us an opportunity to measure evidence of what we see happening in the classroom compared to what we've invested in the teachers. We also have instructional coaches that have a walkthrough tool that they use, and they collect data on what they see in the classrooms, and that information is discussed and shared back with the teachers as well. Through the evaluation tool itself, stages, it does require the administrators to do walkthroughs in the classroom, as well as I require them for myself and the district leadership team and administrators. And that data is used and looked at and discussed to evidence if what's been developed in the staff, are we seeing evidence of that being implemented in the classrooms and in the schools. Those are just some examples.
How often are the walkthroughs?
It varies. It's up to the people. I try to get into a building every day, and while in the building, I try to do a walkthrough. It didn't always occur, but the administrators and the leadership teams, Mrs. Robinson, those persons, would try to move forward with those through my Excel team from the beginning. So, the stages, I want to say, requires principals to do, I'm not going to remember, it's a couple per each semester. But we encourage and expect more than what the actual evaluation tool requires. But it's a lot. It's a lot of them. Not as many as I would like to see them, but there are a lot of them. There's never too many walkthroughs. It's just based on time. As far as school improvement, I shared with you that the district does have its district improvement plan. There are building improvement plans for each building. They are all aligned. Those plans are also aligned with the partnership agreement. All those goals are all consistent. And I shared with you in your data evidence that we have maintained those same goals from the 16-17 school year and then into this current school year. So there's consistency for the staff and understanding what is expected around where our focus is and where our resources should be allocated. And so again, I scored a 3, a very, very solid school improvement plan that was actually developed in conjunction with the Department of Education. When I came through the educational plan, Dr. Teasley played a key role in developing this school improvement plan that we are currently operating under.
Superintendent, how much did you, we did get a list of what the consultant provided. We did hear you just say what Dr. Teasley provided. What % of the improvement plan do you feel like you provided?
So when I first came to Benton Harbor, This plan was being developed, so I spent extensive time with Mrs. Robinson. I don't know that I can give you a percentage, but I can tell you I spent extensive time with Mrs. Robinson and reviewed and developed and rounded out the plan. And then taking that plan and streamlining it or fine tuning it into the partnership agreement, and the work around that was all that I also did. Other questions? Curriculum, I gave a 4. The curriculum is very exciting for me because when I first came to Benton Harbor, the first thing that I learned, the district did not have curriculum going into the 16-17 school year and had just adopted curriculum. It was 2016. I came in February, but there were no resources for the curriculum, no financial resources. So I worked with Scott Johnson. That was a huge area of focus for me. And Scott was able to find some, I don't know, mistakes somebody else made. I can't totally speak to it, but I know he found the money that was not initially budgeted, and the $200,000 that we needed, and we were able to purchase the curriculum in English Language Arts and in math. And the teachers were static, so that by the time this school year, the 17-18 school year came around, the teachers had begun receiving their new curriculum. We did have a situation that had occurred where how the curriculum was going to be ordered for the second year. So we got it in the 16-17 school year, which was great. It came late by the time we found the money, but the staff had it. And then for the start of this school year, for the most part, staff had their ELA in math. But also during the 16-17 school year, Mrs. Robinson led the work, which was fitting, around selecting new curriculum for social studies and science, which was a requirement by the state as well. And we were able to purchase that curriculum. And so the staff were really excited about the new science curriculum and the new social studies curriculum for the 17-18 school year. So currently during this school year, our staff are working across 4 content areas in relatively new curriculum. So even though there are opportunities, again, for the staff to develop and grow in using and having the curriculum, the fact is we do have a current relevant curriculum that is aligned to the state and to best practice.
I have a question, Dr. Walker. Talk to us, I'm sorry, ma'am.
No, go ahead.
So talk to us about math, because we're on curriculum. Now, what about the Carnegie math books we have? Are those type of things being utilized in the classroom? Or because we know we don't have the math teachers, especially at the high school. So how is that instruction happening? Because if you give yourself a 4 and our students really don't have the teachers for math and they're really working on a computer, how do we get to a 4?
Because this is not measuring the staff, this is the tool. We have the tools to teach. So to your question, Carnegie is a subsidized program. It is not our core curriculum for math. Engage New York is the core curriculum. So when you talk about curriculum as far as it's aligned, it's in place, it's in compliance with state standards, that's true. Now, the fidelity by which it may be taught or having the best people or the right people, that's an HR issue. But in terms of actually having curriculum, it's in place, it is aligned, and it is state approved.
So I would defer back to the partnership agreement, right, which requires us to make sure we hire math teachers in that agreement and instruction, things like that. So I would have to look both ways, because I think some of your evaluation is based on what's in the partnership agreement as well.
I completely agree. Again, curriculum is not the hiring. So, and then when you go back to the partnership agreement, that is the function through Barry and Risa and their team. And so we'll come to that if we have time into that section. And you will note that there's no 4 there, because we do have a lot of opportunity. Has the effort been put in place, and have I supported and worked within that effort? When we talk about the human resource side of staffing, absolutely. But just because we put the effort in doesn't mean we yield the results that we're after. We have not been successful in yielding the results that we need, which is to get the right staff and a number of staff. And that, again, ties into a host of other areas like salaries and things like that.
Thank you.
Superintendent, on May 9th, 2017, this board did approve a substantial amount of Carnegie material and math books, and those books are still sitting in a facility. At this time, we've asked several times, and we've had students ask about those books, and those books have, I know, more than a year plus. And again, it was a substantial amount of money. And we also, other books that have been ordered as far as curriculum is concerned and have not been put into the system. Could you give us an explanation?
Absolutely. So first off, what was purchased for Carnegie was more of a service that has supplies that came with it, but it is not, again, the primary curriculum. It's a support curriculum. And so the teachers working through the curriculum office, and when they look at curriculum and they determine how they're going to support the student learning, is when those support materials are utilized. So that is discretionary and through choice, but that entire package that we did purchase did involve having math coaches through Carnegie, and the use of the high school teachers who really wanted Carnegie as their primary math when I came. But the decisions have been made prior to my arrival that it was going to be Engaged New York. So the teachers did not want to step away from Carnegie at the high school in my conversations with them. And so but I didn't maintain Carnegie initially because of funding, but later in the summer, working and learning more by the time I had been here about 5 months in, realized the value that Carnegie Math was to the high school and how they used it as a supplemental material for their instruction. But the state, Carnegie is not state approved for this, so it cannot be the primary curriculum. And so we brought it back in as a supplemental curriculum, which is what was renewed in May as a supplemental curriculum. So it is possible that through, and especially we lost, a couple math teachers from last year to this year, that all those materials have not been fully integrated, but they are there, they're available to be used, and that's again why the 4.
You, Superintendent, I've been notified you have how many minutes? So we'll limit our questions with
7 minutes.
7.
And so as far as instruction, you'll notice a 2, because that is the difference. Having material is great, but ensuring that staff understand how to teach kids to learn is another variable. That's why it's listed as a separate item. Instruction is not an area that I have given much attention to, nor provided much leadership around. I think there's a degree of it happening, like we've reassigned, I can speak to it in your packet, it shows we've reassigned the instructional coaches to provide better support to the teachers on how to help children learn. But in terms of really digging into what's called differentiation and ensuring that students are in a position to get learning at the level where they are, and especially when you look at our data and you see how vastly low our achievement score is across math and our achievement score is across ELA, really getting to a level of understanding how to instruct students in learning, we have not dived into as a district in my expertise, from what I know to what we're doing. And so there's a 2 there. For student feedback, I listed as a 3. Again, seeking to get the input from the students, accepting it, looking for instruments we have, and you'll notice for the parents, the staff, and the students, we use the Safe and Civil survey, and specifically seeking input and feedback around school climate. And I gave you in one of the packets a printout from Dream, and I only did Dream because it's just such a smaller school, so it was less paper. Of Dream's actual survey, but that survey is done in the fall and in the spring, and the students are surveyed, the parents are surveyed, and the staff are surveyed using that tool. So we do seek their input, but in terms of really, how I would love to do it, there's not been an opportunity to actively seek their input. So I selected the 3 there. And around student attendance, a lot of attention, purposeful attention went into this school year in particular, focused on improving and addressing student attendance. Our first task was to really discern how are we addressing attendance. And so if you all recall, there's been discussion with you in the past around frustration with the Power School, our inability to properly use the tool, making sure staff understand the importance of taking attendance, creating unified systems around the expectation for taking attendance. So in the package, you have documentation that highlights through the weekly memo, how we began into this school year trying to create a universal understanding for the staff of attendance taking, while we also created a truancy protocol that we did not have. And so it's been tweaked and adjusted, and it was put into effect actually in this semester. So I'm not up on how it's been faring, but I do know in January, a meeting was held and some revisions to the initial form was done as we began to use it. I also included a documentation for you from the DHHS, I think it's the name of the department, but the Department of Human and Health Services, yes. Because we started off last year with DHHS and MLK, and I had some conversations over the summer. And MLK really likes the work that DHHS provided. They are specifically helpful around truancy issues and working with the parents. And so I was able to work with and have conversations with the head of that program called Pathways to Potential. And ultimately, the initial response had been we were not going to be able to get it, but through some further conversations, we were able to get a second Pathways to Potential program that began at Hall and is in place at this school year. So that's pretty exciting. So again, there's a lot more that needs to be done with attendance, but there are a lot of solid things that have been put in place in the past year and a half that were not in place before.
I do have a quick question on attendance, because it has been a concern. The numbers that we have been getting throughout the year. First, we started out with September 20th, 2020, 2017, 2,514. And then a few days later, we only had 2,158 kids in class. So what you're saying now is the information that we got is being corrected? Was it inaccurate? Because it's almost impossible for in 3 or 4 days to miss almost 300 kids. And then a lot of the numbers that we've gotten and in attendance, we don't have one document that matches. So what you're saying, that has been corrected?
No, two different things, Ms. Seeds.
But I'm talking about in attendance.
Right.
You're talking about attendance.
I'm talking about attendance too,
Okay.
but what I talked about has nothing to do with what you just shared.
Okay.
So I'm talking about attendance around ensuring that we have processes and procedures in place for kids to, to make sure they're coming to school. You're talking about data collection. That's a whole different issue. So you're talking about how is that data collected and how is it reported out? And that goes back to the use of Power School and how that data is rolled over. So the 2,500 that you noted is what was rolled over from the past school year. And it has to do with, again, how well the staff, particularly secretaries, understand their work in terms of when kids should be dropped, who have not been attending, and who have switched schools, and et cetera. And so what we call, cleaning up that data, that is a very important process. That if not, and that's what you got from the 2,500 to the 2,100, as the data was cleaned up properly and students were properly assessed as to are they, in the system and just listed because at some point they attended Benton Harbor, or are they actually attending? Two different buckets. This one is talking about, the way I interpreted attendance, this is, and when you look at the different criteria, this is about that area of focus, having a plan, looking at interventions, trying to address chronic attendance, and that's where the truancy comes in, and to work toward improving the overall attendance rate.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent. We have 1 more minute, and what is the will of the board? If the will of the board is to allow the superintendent more time, or are you all comfortable with proceeding to the evaluation?
Would you like more time?
What,
Does the superintendent want more time?
Superintendent, are you asking for more time?
I will support the will of the board. I've given you all the documents. Maybe it's best to just see what questions you have, And that way, because that was a part of this challenge, was there had been a pre-decision with us on what the tools would be determined and how it would be defined as the tool requires. So for me to determine what you all would want to see, it was, a guess for me. So I provided what I thought would best answer what questions you might have.
Trustee.
So, Madam President, I want to defer to the proctor. What is, we started out with a timeline of 30 minutes, right, to state, the components of this plan. Do we need to focus to be timely to complete the evaluation, or can we defer a little bit from the time? Defer, I'm sorry.
No, that really is up to the board. I mean, the challenge is that, you've got other things on the agenda tonight. So you just have to weigh that against what other things you need to accomplish this evening.
And we do appreciate the superintendent providing us with the artifacts. And we're looking at last year's evaluation and comparing last year's to this year. So what is the will of the board at this time? Do we want to proceed into the evaluation?
I would like to proceed.
Okay.
Let's go ahead.
Okay, I do believe Ms. McGowan proceed, Mr. Mitchell. Okay, thank you, Superintendent. Now, Ms. Also, if you would, please.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and start at the beginning of the instrument. So I'm gonna have you turn to your notes in governance and board relations A. And as I mentioned to you, each time we move through this, I'm gonna simply kind of ask each of you what you have in your notes as far as the rating. And then based on what I'm hearing, I'll suggest a consensus score. I need some physical feedback from you to know that that's okay, or if we need to have further conversation around it, okay? So that said, I am now looking at A1, policy involvement. And I'm gonna go ahead and start with President's seats and then work my way left, if that's okay with everybody.
Yes, that is fine.
Okay.
I'm ready.
So the score that you had noted for A1 policy involvement.
The score that I had noted for policy involvement was A1.
Okay. Trustee Mahoney?
Two.
Thank you.
2 as well.
Thank you. So based on what I'm hearing, a 2 is the consensus score I would suggest for that. Everybody can live with that? Okay. So now I'm looking at A2 goal development. The same thing, I'll start with President seats.
I'm at a 1.5.
You're waiting for me, I'm sorry.
Okay, I was probably thinking.
Okay, 1.5. 2.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you.
2.5.
So I would suggest a 2 as a consensus score for this. Is that something everybody can live with? Okay. Okay, we'll move on to A3, which is information.
Can you come back?
I can actually start the other way. Trustee.
No, you're fine.
Oh.
Let me, I would say a 1.
Thank you.
1.
Thank you.
1.5.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you.
1.5.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a 1.5 for a consensus score for that one.
Very good.
Okay.
Are we allowed to say why?
You certainly can.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, we're now looking at A4, which is materials and background.
$1.5.
Thank you.
1.5,
Thank you.
2,
Thank you.
That was 2 as well.
Thank you.
I have a 1.5, and I like to state why.
please.
Because too many times during the year, agendas were manipulated at the last moment, and background information wasn't provided to the board to consume and to digest in a timely manner. And that was spoken to many times during the year, and it really did not change.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a 2 for a consensus score for this one. Do you want me to repeat back what you said so you know what the scores were around the table?
Yes,
Please.
please.
Okay. So 1.5, 1.5, 2, 2, 1.5. And we have to keep it to the half score.
I know several times the former president had to send emails because we did not get stuff in a timely fashion, and not just for weeks, for months. And I do have a copy of that email. I'm satisfied with whatever the board is saying, but it did become, like Trustee Mitchell said, an overwhelming problem. And then items were put on the agenda at the last minute. We did not have enough information to make informed decisions.
Is 1.5 more reflective of the performance? Is that a consensus score?
I think so.
I'm
Just because
fine
I agree with
whatever
Mr.
the board-
Mitchell and Ms. Seeds. It wasn't an occasional problem. It just seemed like it happened over and over and over.
Thank you. Okay, I'm recording 1.5 as the consensus score for A4. A5, board questions.
I do have a 1, and I have a whole packet where I pulled down all questions over the course of the year and put them into line items, questions that were not answered, and questions where some of the questions would say, I need more information, or, and I don't want to read them, but I have at least 12 pages of questions unanswered, and I put them in lines where who was responsible for the answer, and so mine is a 1.
Thank you.
A 1, and I followed suit. We had extreme difficulty getting accurate answers to questions. And sometimes we had to seek the information ourselves and then say, wait a minute, this is what we're finding out.
Thank you.
So did I tell you 1?
You
I
did.
remember, okay.
1. Thank you.
2.
Thank you.
1.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a consensus score of 1 for board questions. Is that something everybody can live with? Thank you. A6 is board development.
I would say a 2.
Thank you.
$1.5. I've been on the board for a number of years, and there's been very few opportunities for the board to go get professional development in the last couple of years. It was more of the culture in previous years that I served on the board. And then, we were made aware of a budget that we had, and we have not been made aware of a budget in recent years.
Thank you.
Two.
Thank you.
I have a 2 as well.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you. I'm gonna suggest a consensus score on that one of a 2. Okay. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move to the next section, which is B, community relations. Give me just a second here. Okay,
I gave it a 1. I have no evidence.
so this is parent feedback B1.
Correct.
Okay.
I've given it a 1. I have no evidence. And I have seen, parents that have came to meetings. I did not see, the application appropriation of suggestions. And I have been told that some have given suggestions and those suggestions were never followed through. So I give them 1.
I'm gonna have you pause for a second. I
Sure thing.
Technical issue I'm trying to resolve here.
Yeah, you get that guy right next to you.
Yeah, no, it's just a spreadsheet. I don't know what it's behaving wildly. Well, let me move through and see if it updates as it's supposed to. So your score was a 1 in that?
That is
Thank you.
correct.
1.5, there seems to be when, that there's a subset of parents that are sometimes engaged, but, and I don't recall receiving any information that shows us the evidence that parents have participated in the school improvement and everything, and I believe that's still a requirement that there be parents involved in doing those school improvement plans.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you.
So for parent feedback, I think I'm like President Seats. I don't see much of that evidence, so I would say a 1.
Thank you.
1.
Thank you. So I'm going to suggest a consensus score of 1 in that area. And I'm gonna have you hold for a second while I check this against it, so I'll make sure it's. I can't get these, I've never had this happen. See how they're all they're interacting together? The sheets should not be.
I get it. Can you save it, get out of it, go back into it?
That's the classic.
Right.
Sorry about this.
Yes, you've gone down much lower. No, she's right there. Yeah, you wanna switch?
They all still look lit up to me. Do you see that? The coloring? So it's making them. Well, I just won't use that as a method. I'll do it via paper and I won't do it about that.
Yeah, little paper and pencil.
I don't like it. Okay, give me a second to get caught up with you then. Okay, so we're on B2, communication with community.
I gave it a 1.5. Again, I do have emails text messages from individuals who have tried to communicate and have done exhausted means to get in touch, and businesses also that have wanted to participate in the school system and have not been communicated back to or denied the opportunity. 1.5.
Thank you.
2, and I feel like there is a little bit more of relationship with businesses, government, and civic groups, but there have been multiple complaints from parents at board meetings and recently at a community meeting about not being included and listened to.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you.
I have a 2 as well. I think when you think about the column, you know, you're there, but you're not proactive, right? It's a reactive thing, right? So we have to be more proactive in the district if we want to really engage community input.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a consensus score for B2 of a 2. Thank you. Now we're on B3, community feedback.
I have a 1.5. I do not see the evidence.
Thank you.
I'd have to go at 1.5 too, because I didn't see actual evidence that the suggestions have been accepted and that they've been engaged.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you.
I have a 2 as well.
Thank you. In this case, I'm going to suggest a 2 as well for community feedback B3. Can everybody live with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, B4 is media relations.
Answer that.
I do see that there is communication with the media, but I did not see that that we were informed of TV interviews, and then we also, some media interviews that were given were incorrect and never corrected. So I would give a 1.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to give a 1 on that because I think in order to tell our story as a district, we always have to befriend the media and reach out first and foremost, so we don't have this at the end, right? And so we got to be proactive versus reactive.
Thank you.
2.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Do you feel ready to jump in?
Yeah.
Okay.
So can I give like a negative number?
The score is from 1 to 4, and you can do to the half scores if you need to.
So I can say 0.
Yeah, you start with 1.
I can say a half.
Technically, yes, you could say half.
A half. 0.5.
I'm going to recommend a 1.5 as a consensus score for this one. Okay, we'll move on to B5, which is district image.
I gave it a 1, and I do have recent information that was given to the board, and information that was in information given was extremely negative about staff, about the district, and so I'm giving it a 1.
Thank you.
0.5.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go with a 2, but I'm concerned that sometimes the district is promoted beyond the realities. That things are embellished sometimes in the promotion, and that we have hinted that we're better than what we are, if you can understand that.
Thank you.
I gave you a score, didn't I?
You said it too,
Okay,
but with that caveat.
all right, thank you.
Two, and I also concur with what Mrs. Maloney said.
Thank you.
I have a 2 for B5 as well.
Thank you. I'm actually going to suggest a consensus score of 2 in this area then. Thank you. B6 is approachability.
And 1.5.
Thank you.
Two.
Thank you.
1.5, and I feel that's because there is visibility and approachability, but it's to a certain subset of the community.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a 2 as well for B6.
Thank you.
1.5.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a 2 for consensus score on this one. Thank you. Okay, we're going to shift our attention to the next section, C. So that starts on page 8. Staff relations. And the first performance indicator in that section is C1, staff feedback.
I gave it a 1, and because of recent events with the teachers and the union, and I do believe there is a subset of teachers and staff that the superintendent did take input from, but there were other teachers and staff that there was no suggestions taken from. A 1.
Thank you.
0.5, because when some staff members express their opinions or their concerns, there's retaliation to termination. So if I could give a negative 1,000, I would, but I can only give 0.5.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll do it 2, but I do have a concern about only part of the staff and teachers are their input is heard, and that there's many, many others that feel that like they're not being heard.
Thank you. A 1. Thank you.
2.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a 2 as a consensus score in this area. Okay. Thank you. We'll now look at C2, staff communications.
I'm going to give that a 1 because of, again, of recent events that have occurred, and staff, I don't have any evidence that there was an alert, that there was concerns, policy violations, or concerns at the state of the level. A 1.
Thank you.
0.5, again, I agree with Ms. Seats.
Thank you.
I do 2, and if I accidentally hit my number before you, that's because I get used to you being here now. Because I was.
You can see me.
No, you're with the 3 going nice tonight.
Oh, okay. Oh, y'all all got dilated?
She got dilated, she has surgery, and I have a bubble on my lens.
Can we
Oh
move
my
on?
God, we got the retirement crew up in here.
You're right about that.
I can't see you, so. Go Martha.
Yeah, I'm done.
Oh, 2.
Thank you.
I have a 2 as well.
Thank you.
I have a 2.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a consensus score of 2 in this performance indicator. We'll move on to C3, personnel matters.
A .5. There is no system to handle personnel matters in a consistent manner, and some situations may be handled with bias, and I do believe there is evidence to substantiate that score. Thank you.
Thank you.
0.5.
Thank you.
1, because if situations are handled with bias.
Thank you.
1.5.
Thank you.
1.
I have 1.5 as well.
Thank you.
No.
I'm going to suggest a consensus score here of 1. Okay, we'll move on to C4, delegation of duties.
I will give a 2 because, again, I said earlier, we do see that we have staff that we have 79 issues that were delegated. So I will give a 2.
Thank you.
1.5.
Thank you.
And a 2, because things have been delegated, perhaps in excess.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you.
2 as well.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a consensus score on this one of a 2. We'll move on to C5, recruitment.
I will give a 2. I do see there has been improvement in recruitment from HR. And I don't know how effective the recruitment has been, but I do see we have a process in place.
Thank you.
1.5.
Thank you.
A 2, because our HR person did just recently outline a recruitment program or plan for us.
Thank you.
3.
Thank you.
So 1.5, because that comes from an outside entity. And to Martha's point, it just, it's being initiated, which is good, but it's not being initiated by superintendent.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a consensus score on this one of 2. C6, labor relations.
I really don't have any evidence. I do know that there were some issues that were resolved. I don't know how that was resolved and who it was resolved with, because we did not get the information even that it was resolved. So I will go with the 2.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you. Thank you.
2.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you. Consensus score on that one of a 2. We'll move to C7, which is visibility in the district.
I will give superintendent a 3.
Thank you.
I'll say a 3 as well.
Thank you.
I'll give it a 3, but I wish we had more evidence to substantiate that there were actually visits or whether they were just items on the calendar that never got done.
Thank you.
3.
Thank you.
2.5.
Thank you.
2.5.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a consensus score for this one of 3. Okay, we'll turn our attention now to the next section, which is D, Business and Finance, on page 10.
Okay, thank you. I will give superintendent a 0.5. There was a policy, and the policy was not followed as far as the fund equity, which requires that it does not drop below 10% and to go into the next budget season. And at that time, the fund equity was 6%. And so then therefore it is a 0.5.
Thank you.
0.5.
Thank you.
A 1, and that is tied to having built a budget based on inaccurate student counts.
Thank you.
1,
Thank you.
1 as well, and I concur with Secretary Momini, because we have had inequities with this budget.
Thank you.
1.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a consensus score for this performance indicator of a 1. Thank you. We're now on to the next item, D2, budget reports.
A 1.
Thank you.
0.5.
Thank you.
The 1, we found it necessary to really push to get accurate information.
Thank you.
1,
Thank you.
1.5.
Thank you.
1.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a consensus score of 1 in this category. Excuse me, this indicator. On to D3, financial controls.
A 1.
Thank you.
0.5.
Thank you.
A 1, as evidenced by the Department of Treasury bringing in Raymond and Associates to work on our finances.
Thank you.
1,
Thank you.
1.5.
Thank you.
1.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a 1 as a consensus score in that indicator. On to D4, facility management.
A 1.
Thank you.
This be in relation to our like real estate plan though? So, just the maintenance? I'm gonna say 1.
A 1, thank you.
I'll say 2, because I think we've taken steps to learn where we stand on maintenance and what needs and need not be done currently.
Thank you.
2. That's true.
Thank you.
So I'm going to say a 1 because when I presented the real estate plan weeks ago, I also presented a facilities management plan moving forward that we don't have in order to manage the buildings and maintenance. So I would give that a 1.
Thank you.
0.5.
I'm sorry, 0.5? Thank you. I'm going to suggest a 1.5 as a consensus score on that performance indicator. Okay, we're on to D5, which is resource allocation.
A 1.
Thank you.
0.5.
Thank you.
1.
Thank you.
1,
Thank you.
1.5.
Thank you.
1.5.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a 1.5 as a consensus score in this indicator. We're going to turn to the next section now. We're on section E, instructional leadership. We'll start with E1, performance evaluation system.
A 2.
Thank you.
I'm leaning more towards a 0.5 just because of last night's presentation. So things would have escalated to the point of the state level had it been a performance evaluation would have been identified.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you.
2,
Thank you.
2 for me.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest 2 as a consensus score in this area. E2 is staff development.
A 2.
Thank you.
Yes, my main concern is with the consistent expression of the lack of availability of accurate data to be provided through PowerSchool. And this was communicated back in July of 2017, that the data that we had from PowerSchool was inaccurate and there were no steps made to assure that staff was properly trained to provide this accurate data based upon a partnership agreement. So we have all this false data that we're working off of, so I'll say 0.5.
Thank you.
I'll actually give it a 3 with the caveat that I'm concerned that we don't follow up and evaluate whether the staff development programs have really made a difference for our students.
Thank you.
3,
Thank you.
2.
Thank you.
You have to offer a 3. However, I feel that programs are offered, but the staff involved are not absorbing and utilizing what they've been taught or learned. So it's ineffective. And,
Thank you. And this indicator. E3 is school improvement.
A 1.
Uh, 0.5.
Thank you.
2,
Thank you.
2.5,
Thank you.
1.5, 1.5.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a 2 as a consensus score in this indicator. E4 is curriculum.
I would say a 1. I do not see curriculum being a priority. When teachers don't, like we heard over and over, there is no curriculum in the school, in the different school facilities, and we just had a conversation about books that have not been open for at least a year. 1.
Thank you.
0.5, because from my understanding, the wide range of substitute teachers that come into our district, that their information and curriculum is not prepared for them and it doesn't match what the teachers already have. So I guess their pacing guides as to where they're supposed to be, those are questionably provided. So I would say 0.5.
Thank you.
A 2. Even though we supposedly have Engage in New York, it's not necessarily adhered to.
Thank you.
2,
Thank you.
So 1.5, and I would agree with Secretary Harmony, because I think that even though we've adopted and paid for a curriculum, I think some classrooms are willy-nilly, that it's not consistency across the district in following that curriculum.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a consensus score of a 2 for that one.
One.
Thank you.
0.5.
Thank you.
1.5, we seem to keep trying to increase the use of technology, but we just don't seem to be able to launch it well enough to make it sustainable.
Thank you.
Two.
Thank you.
I would say two as well, and one note to the board is that when new teachers come in, it could be via a regular teacher or substitute. Those things from technology aren't in place to help them to teach some of those things, right? Like that whiteboard should be active, their PC should be active, things like that are inactive. So we need to do more of the front end when teachers come into the district.
Thank you.
1.5.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a 1.5 score for this indicator. E6, student feedback.
I have no evidence, except for lately we've had students come before the board, and I don't see the implementation, or I haven't heard personally a report on any student feedback. I understand that there may be some surveys. I have not seen those surveys, so I'm gonna, I'll say at 1.5.
Thank you.
Right, I don't have anything to go off of either. I know that, students even know who the superintendent is. So I'm gonna say a 0.5.
I'll do a 2, but I think the input, first, we have not seen evidence from surveys and stuff. And then I think we run into a subset of people, of students that we hear from, perhaps only those who are giving positive feedback is what we hear from, rather than having everyone give input.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. I'm going to suggest a consensus score of a 2 for that indicator. On to E7, student attendance.
A 1, because attendance rates, we don't know if they're increasing or decreasing by the numbers that we get that are inaccurate, and somebody else may have some numbers at the board that the rest of us haven't seen, but according to the numbers that are sent in our email, they're inaccurate and they're inconsistent. So 1.
Thank you.
Well, let me see here. Back at when the school times had changed and it was supposed to address student attendance to allow the students at the high school to attend school later and help them to go to school on time, because there was some random research done and it was supposed to improve their attendance, but actually it got worse. So I'm saying 0.5.
Thank you.
A 1, we can't seem to get active attendance. In fact, one set of figures we got showed a student absenteeism, but we don't know whether it's true or not because every set of data we get is different.
Thank you.
1, and I concur again with Mrs. Mulligan.
Thank you.
I'm gonna say 1.5 because, I mean, we've lost students, not gained, as well as public school should be easy, simple. If it's in there, right, our data should be legit.
Thank you.
1.
Thank you. I'm gonna suggest a consensus score of 1. Thank you. Okay, this continues on to page 13 to E8, support for students.
I'm gonna give superintendent a 2. I do believe academic supports are in place, but social supports to meet the needs of the students are lacking. I don't have the evidence of how the programs are working. We requested time slots, and the time slots are inconsistent to what we approved. So I would say there are some supports in place, but how effective they are, I have no idea. A 2.
Thank you. 1. Thank you.
2.
Thank you.
1.5.
Thank you.
I have 1.5 as well.
Thank you.
2.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a consensus score of 2 in this indicator. Okay, moving on to E9, professional knowledge.
I would give the superintendent a 2.
Thank you.
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 2.
Thank you. We'll suggest a 2. We're gonna turn to section G now, which is student growth.
I will give the superintendent a 0.5. There has been no student growth, and and we have lost students during the current school year.
Thank you. Thank you.
A 1. When you, no matter what fancy math you use or whatever, when you look at the number of students that are proficient, and when you've got 400 kids in a building and 8 of them proficient, that means you got 392 that are not.
So your score was a 1.
Yes.
Thank you.
1.
Thank you.
1.
Thank you.
0.5.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a 1 as a consensus score. Thank you. So now we're looking at progress towards district-wide goals.
A 1.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd say 1. When you have MDE is a little concerned about whether we're gonna make our partnership agreement goals. That speaks a lot of words.
Thank you.
1.
Thank you.
1 for me.
Thank you.
1.
Thank you. So I'm going to suggest a consensus score of a 1 in that indicator. Okay, so now I need to fix my problem over here to calculate the score. And I'm going to take my time to make sure it's fixed properly, obviously.
Please do.
So with that in mind, I don't know if you want to go into your closed session while I'm doing this. I'm happy to wait. I don't know how long you're going to be in closed session.
Okay, all right. We want to sit here and watch you.
Take a break, man.
You might want to take a break because I'm not. I'm
Yeah,
going to
take a
take my
break, yeah,
time. Make sure
yeah,
it's all
it's
right.
important that you.
He does have to leave at 8 o'clock, and so attorney, if it is okay, because of, we do need trustee Gully here. If we could make a motion to go out of open session and then, go into closed session.
I make a motion to-
Attorney-client privilege.
Make a motion to go out of open session into closed session for attorney-client privilege.
So moved.
We have a motion and a support. Madam Secretary, you would call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. McGowan,
Yes.
Mrs. Mamini, yes, Ms. Gully,
Yes.
and Ms. Seat.
Yes. this time.
Make a motion to come back into open session.
I need a support. I have a motion and a support. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Ms. Momini, yes. Ms. McGowan,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
And Ms. Seeds.
Yes. Motion carried. At this time on the agenda, we will go back to MASB facilitator Donna Oser for the results of the evaluation. Ms. Oser.
So I'm gonna read through the category score, kind of reflect on the weightings, just to remind the group of how these things are weighted. Because there's a, kind of a preliminary calculation for the professional practice rating, and then the professional practice, progress towards district-wide goals and student growth are calculated into that final score. So I'm gonna read through those. Now, understand that I don't have to read the individual indicator scores because that was done in an open meeting and not a closed meeting. However, the board will still need to take action on this officially. And so you'll want to be attentive to the scores that I'm reading off to you. And if you have any questions or we need to review anything, then we would most certainly do that. Okay? All right. So first, in order to calculate the professional practice rating, now that is comprised of section A, governance and board relations. That category is weighed at 20%, and the score was 1.5, the category score in that. B, community relations, which is weighed at 15%, and the score in that category was 1.75. C is staff relations, which is weighed at 15%, and that was weighted, or that calculation was a 2 for that particular category. D, finance, which is weighed at 20%, and the category score for that was 1.2. E, instructional leadership, which is weighed at 30%, and the category score for that was 1.94. So the professional practice rating that will be moving forward into the final calculation is 1.69. Okay? So if you're following along with me, now I'm going to have you turn to page 16. And this is where those 3 final pieces are actually calculated into the final score. So that professional practice rating of, let me get to that page down here. The professional practice rating of the 1.69 is weighed at 65%, so that comes forward. Student growth, that category score was a 1, and that is weighed at 25%. And progress towards district-wide goals, the category score on that was a 1, and it's weighed at 10%. So when you calculate that in, that comes up with a total score of 1.45. So you can think about that in terms of the scoring on a scale of 1 to 4. And then as we break that down into a percentile of 36%, that would be a score of ineffective.
Okay. Questions from the board? Mrs. Olson. No questions at this time from the board.
Okay, so the board will need to take action on this. And then after that, I'd like to give you some guidance on what the state's expectations are when a score of that is issued.
And so that action is expected tonight.
Right.
Right, so we have voted to accept the score of 36% from the MASB evaluation.
I have a motion. I need a support.
Support.
A motion and a support. Any questions or comments at this time before we call the roll? Madam Secretary, if you would, please call the roll.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. McGowan,
Yes.
Mrs. Momini, yes, and Ms. Seeds.
Yes. Thank you again, Ms. Olson.
You're welcome. So in establishing the expectations from the state as far as the fact that everyone who is routinely involved in instruction has to be evaluated annually, the state has an expectation that this is to some extent a developmental process. And so what that means is that because you have rated your superintendent as less than effective, now it behooves the board to begin the process of developing a development plan in conjunction with the superintendent, so that the superintendent knows what areas that she needs to work on, and then talk about what kind of supports need to be put in place for her growth and development so that she can be successful in her position.
And does MASB have a template?
We do, and there's actually some guidance in the instrument that you have. There's kind of a basic outline of that, and that really should be a collaborative process, obviously, between the board and the superintendent for that. That's not something that has to be done tonight, but that's really what should be worked on in the short term.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board at this time? Okay, thank you so much. And if we have no more questions or for Donna also, we will move to the next item on the agenda. And board president's comments, and there are none from me. Comments from board members at this time. Mr. Mitchell,
None at this time.
Mr. Taylor,
No comments.
trustee McGowan,
No comments.
trustee Mommy.
No comment.
If you have no comments and there is nothing under other, any announcements or reminders at this time?
Yeah, so we have an announcement, First Robotics, the Tech Tigers meet this week at St. Joseph High School, Friday and Saturday. Start times are 9 until I think 6 o'clock at night, right?
Thank you. No other announcements or reminders. I would entertain a motion for adjournment at this time.
Go ahead.
So moved.
I support.
Okay, we have a motion and a support for adjournment. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. McGowan,
Yes.
Ms. Momini, yes. Ms. Seats.
Yes. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.